I'm going to have a baby. We've always wanted kids since we got married. I happily shared the news with my husband, Bob, expecting him to be thrilled, considering all the challenges we faced. But his reaction caught me off guard. It felt like I had been pushed off a cliff. My name is Catherine, and I'm 40 years old. Bob confessed his feelings to me, and we got married when I was 30. I'd always dreamed of having a happy family, surrounded by a loving husband and smiling children. Despite my serious nature, I hesitated to get into a relationship, and before I knew it, my 20s were almost over, making me increasingly anxious. Both my sisters were already married, adding to the pressure. When Bob confessed, I quickly responded, and we started dating. We worked together, and since I knew Bob's personality from our interactions, I felt positive about him. Despite only dating for a year, I was drawn to his cheerful and easygoing nature, something I lacked. Believing we could complement each other well, we decided to tie the knot. I'm usually overly optimistic. I think we need someone serious like you, Catherine. I believe with you, we could lead a stable life and make a great couple. Hearing these words from Bob meant a lot to me, as I had always been a bit self-conscious about my serious nature. While we weren't head over heels in love, I could confidently say there was love between us, and I believed we could have a happy married life. After getting married, we both had jobs. Being in our 30s, we decided it was time to think about having children. Since we held senior positions, our salaries were quite high. We had our hearts set on having 2 children and eagerly looked forward to the day they would become part of our lives. Until then, we committed to working hard to secure a good future for our family. However, even after 2 years of marriage, I wasn't pregnant. In the first year, we shrugged off the disappointment, reminding ourselves that having a child is a blessing that can't be rushed. "We've only been married for a year. Let's not hurry things," Bob would joke, lifting my spirits whenever I felt down. So at that time, I believed it would happen soon and looked forward to it without anxiety. However, as the second year passed, the reality that I still wasn't pregnant began to weigh on us. Bob, too, became somber, expecting that by now, we would naturally have a child. Our shared anxieties led to disagreements, and heated arguments became a part of our routine. Considering our age, the fact that we hadn't conceived yet was concerning. Bob suggested we get checked out at a hospital once we cooled off from our argument. I agreed, thinking it was a practical approach. Both of us underwent tests, and fortunately, there were no health issues, easing my worries about potential fertility problems. The doctor suggested it was simply a matter of timing, so we continued our efforts, diligently following any advice given. Despite our efforts, tensions increased, and arguments became more frequent. Our home, once envisioned as a happy, smile-filled place, now had minimal interaction. However, I refused to give up, believing that once we had a child, the life I had imagined would become a reality. Finally, after 10 years of marriage, I discovered I was pregnant. While my sisters had already started their families, and I had been envious for a long time, now I too was expecting. The moment I heard the test results, overwhelmed with joy and the realization of a long-held dream, I broke down in tears for an extended period. The inability to conceive had been a source of sadness, but now I felt an overwhelming sense of happiness. Though we initially wanted 2 children, at this point, I was content with just one, as long as the baby was born healthy. That was all that mattered as I lovingly caressed my belly, wishing for a healthy child. After leaving the hospital, brimming with happiness, I couldn't resist grinning as I immediately called Bob to share the news. However, it appeared he was at work and abruptly ended the call, seeming a bit curt. I felt a twinge of guilt for calling during work hours and realized my excitement got the better of me. So I decided to wait and tell him about the pregnancy when he got home and had a chance to settle down. "I had a checkup today and learned I'm pregnant. We're finally going to have a baby." I intended to deliver the news calmly, but my happiness overflowed, and I excitedly shared it with him. After a decade of wanting a child, and now being pregnant, I expected him to be thrilled. However, his reaction didn't align with my expectations. Really? At our age? He seemed irritated, adding, "Do you even realize how old you are? You're 40, right? There are risks with having a child at this age." The doctor had mentioned this, but I was assured that with proper precautions, everything would be fine. True, having my first child at an older age presented challenges, but I was prepared for it. I had made up my mind to have this baby. Upon expressing my feelings, my husband only appeared more upset, saying, "Raising a kid at 40, and we don't even know if the baby will be born without any health issues. It might have disabilities." He believed that with advanced maternal age, only children with problems are born, and he didn't want to deal with caregiving. He argued that he wants care in his old age but doesn't want to be burdened with taking care of a child with special needs. It felt like he saw our child as merely a convenient tool. "It's your child too, you know? How can you say such things after all we've been through? We're finally blessed. Aren't you happy?" I retorted in frustration, expressing my commitment to cherish our child, disabilities or not. In his anger, he blamed me for the delayed pregnancy and even threw out the suggestion of divorce. "That's it. Let's get a divorce." Initially, I struggled to comprehend my husband's words and instinctively asked him to repeat it. Why would such a comment follow the joyful news of my pregnancy? What did he mean? He then proceeded to express his dissatisfaction with our life together. Now at 40, he felt the pregnancy was overdue. My constant seriousness, which he once thought suitable for marriage, now seemed like a mistake. My husband's harsh words hurt, but some of them strangely resonated with me. Over the past decade, I had noticed issues with his character despite being initially drawn to his cheerful nature. I had planned to overlook these flaws and continue our life together, but now it seemed impossible. He tended to take things lightly, and his cheerfulness had turned into frivolousness. Quarrels over various matters, not just the child, had cooled our marital relationship. I sensed a misalignment in our values, and this incident solidified my realization. I wanted a child, so I endured our differences, but now I think it's enough. I'd rather not have a father who doesn't cherish his child. When he insisted on the divorce, I agreed. A week after confirming the pregnancy, our divorce was finalized. During this process, my husband demanded alimony, claiming I had wasted 10 years of his life. Legally, there was no reason to pay him. In fact, I countered that if anything, I should receive alimony. He seemed to abandon that idea, but then he refused to pay child support. Initially, I wanted him to contribute for the sake of the child, but his stubbornness made it challenging. Frustrated and wanting a quick separation, I decided to seek child support under the condition that he would have no contact with the child. In terms of our assets, since we both worked and split monthly expenses evenly, and we rented our home, there was no property division. This allowed me to take all of my savings without any dispute. Knowing that he had spent a significant amount on his hobbies, keeping the savings private was crucial. Although I never disclosed the exact amount, he agreed to forego property division swiftly. I had been prudent with my savings, providing me with a sense of security that they would last about 5 years, even if I couldn't work post-divorce. Packing my belongings, I promptly returned to my parents' home in Nebraska, where both were in their 80s but in good health. They warmly welcomed me back, expressing joy about my pregnancy. Despite the disappointment from my ex-husband, witnessing my parents' happiness finally brought me relief. I was determined to ensure the safety and well-being of my child. My son was born without complications, alleviating my concerns about giving birth at an older age. He was a healthy boy without any disabilities. My siblings, who already had families of their own, also provided care. With the support of my parents, raising the child went smoothly, and I named him John. Having left my previous job, and with financial help from my severance and parents, I focused on raising John. Until he turned about a year old, I later found a new job. Despite being busy and often tired, all my free time was dedicated to John. His smiles rejuvenated me, and although he was a bit introverted and quiet, he loved it when I read storybooks to him. Showing enthusiasm for learning even at a young age, he eagerly started learning letters when given a workbook at age 5. Worried that his seriousness might hinder making friends in elementary school, he surprised me by joyfully attending school and playing with friends after classes. John wasn't initially very athletic, but in middle school he developed a dream for his future and underwent significant changes. Determined to overcome his weaknesses, he became more passionate about his studies. I worried about his intense focus, but as time passed, he not only improved physically but also joined a sports team in high school, eventually winning awards in competitions. Witnessing him, once not very athletic, shine in competitions filled me with pride. In college, he excelled in both academics and sports, becoming more sociable and enjoying time with friends. He seemed to be a well-rounded individual both personally and in terms of capabilities. I felt there was little for me to worry about, that I remained vigilant and ready to support and protect John if needed. Fortunately, for now, it didn't seem necessary. Finally, he landed the job he always wanted and moved out, but we kept in regular touch. Occasionally, he visited with gifts, helped around the house, and remained considerate. He turned out to be a wonderful son. Despite not being the best father, he grew up to be a remarkable young man, and I couldn't be prouder. After 25 years since the divorce, I turned 65 and retired. I had worked hard to ensure I wouldn't be a burden on my son in my later years. Despite retiring, I remained energetic and planned to keep working. When I shared this with my son, he wanted to properly celebrate my retirement and upcoming birthday, suggesting we go out for a meal. Aware of his busy schedule, only in his second year at work, I told him that the thought alone was enough. However, he insisted, saying, "I owe you a lot, Mom. I've gotten used to work, and I've got more time now. Don't worry about me." Since high school, he had consistently expressed gratitude and thanked me for everything. Each time, I was overwhelmed by how wonderfully he had grown. Starting work seemed to have given him a renewed sense of gratitude. "You faced challenges as a single mom, but you always supported me in everything I wanted to try. Thanks to you, I'm living my dream now." My son expressed his gratitude, feeling that he had a comfortable childhood despite the struggles. It felt like something any parent would do, but hearing his appreciation, I couldn't refuse. Overwhelmed with emotion, I agreed, and we planned to have dinner at a restaurant he had booked, followed by shopping for my birthday present. I looked forward to the day. On the chosen day, I dressed up a bit and went out with my son. We strolled to the restaurant, chatting happily, and I felt proud looking at my grown-up son. Raising him on my own was a decision I made, with support from my parents and siblings making it bearable. He used to be so small, but now he had grown significantly, I thought, looking up at my son who was now taller than me. Over time, his face had matured, and as I noticed the passing days, I felt happiness. But then, I suddenly felt like a bucket of cold water was thrown over me. "Catherine, long time no see." Initially not recognizing the voice, I realized it was my aged ex-husband. He was with a woman who looked younger than him. From a distance, he called out and deliberately approached us. "What do you want?" I responded coldly, not wanting to engage with him on that fine day. After our divorce, we hadn't communicated at all, so I wondered what he wanted now. As I looked at him skeptically, my ex-husband came closer, took a long look at me and my son, and then laughed mockingly. "You still have that sour look on your face," he said. "Is that the kid we had when we divorced? Still taking care of him, huh? Good for you." Assuming our son had some disability, he began bragging about his own life without being asked. He informed me he had remarried soon after our divorce and now had a daughter in college, boasting about her success in a prestigious university. He also boasted about his new wife, who was 10 years younger than him, and their quick expansion of the family. "Our marriage was a complete waste of time," he boasted, seemingly approaching me just to mock me. Though infuriated, I wanted to leave, claiming I had plans. But he wasn't done yet. Ignoring my evident annoyance, he began to mock my son. "Is he disabled and a lot of trouble? Can he even get a job? Looks like you'll have no one to help you in your old age. Tough break. While I could handle insults about myself, insults about my son were unbearable. I raised my hand to hit him, but my son stopped me. Mom, it's not worth our time dealing with him. Let's go. Remaining calm, my son held me back, disregarding my ex-husband and showing concern for me. There was a time when my son was curious about his father. I had promised to tell him about our divorce once he was an adult, and I had. If it seemed he had decided to consider himself as not knowing his father. My son replied, "What's with that attitude towards your dad?" My mother raised me. I don't have a father. This seemed to trigger my ex-husband, who hadn't been paying child support, to attempt lecturing my son. Unfazed, my son looked at him coldly and retorted, "Are you unemployed? You really are a fool, just like you look." My ex-husband responded with mocking laughter. Remaining composed, my son calmly stated, "I work as a diplomat." When he mentioned the prestigious university he attended, my ex-husband looked shocked. It was a well-known and challenging institution, recognized for its prestige. Becoming a diplomat requires significant education and a good character, making it a demanding profession to pursue. This is why my son aimed for prestigious universities, providing a better chance of achieving his goal. My ex-husband clearly hadn't anticipated this revelation, and disbelief twisted his face. Witnessing my calm son and my stunned ex-husband, I finally felt at peace. It reassured me that divorcing him had been the right decision. I was certain that if I had stayed with him for the sake of our son, it would have negatively impacted our son's upbringing. The woman accompanying my ex-husband appeared very surprised, not just by my son's achievements, but also by his appearance. When my ex-husband resumed hurling abuses, she promptly intervened. "Hey, what's up? You shouldn't talk to this person like that. Let's get going." Reprimanding her ex-husband, who seemed oblivious, she led him away. I wondered if she knew my son based on her demeanor. When I inquired, my son claimed he didn't know her. Unable to comprehend, I decided to let go of the matter concerning my ex-husband and savor the moment. Afterward, I celebrated with my son and thoroughly enjoyed the day. I thought I wouldn't have any dealings with my ex-husband anymore, but a week later he called. I hadn't changed my phone number when I switched to a smartphone, intending to keep my ex-husband's number for a while and delete it later. However, with parenting and work, I had forgotten about it completely. Surprised by the call and considering we had nothing to talk about, I debated whether to answer. Out of curiosity, wondering why he would call now after all this time, I'd ultimately decided to pick up. My son responded, "What's with that attitude towards your dad?" My mother raised me. I don't have a father. This seemed to provoke my ex-husband, who hadn't contributed child support, into attempting to lecture my son. Unfazed, my son looked at him coldly and retorted, "Are you unemployed? You really are a fool, just like you look." My ex-husband responded with mocking laughter. Maintaining composure, my son calmly stated, "I work as a diplomat." When my son mentioned the challenging university he attended, my ex-husband looked shocked. It was a renowned institution, recognized for its prestige, even by those unfamiliar with it. Becoming a diplomat requires significant education and a good character, making it a challenging profession to enter, even for aspiring individuals. That's why my son aimed for prestigious universities, offering a better chance of achieving his goal. My ex-husband clearly hadn't anticipated this revelation, and disbelief twisted his face. Observing my calm son and my stunned ex-husband, I finally felt at peace. It reassured me that divorcing him had been the right decision. I was certain that if I had stayed with him for the sake of our son, it would have negatively impacted our son's upbringing. The woman accompanying my ex-husband appeared very surprised, not just by my son's achievements, but also by his appearance. When my ex-husband resumed hurling abuses, she promptly intervened. "Hey, what's up? You shouldn't talk to this person like that. Let's get going." Reprimanding her ex-husband, who seemed oblivious, the woman dragged him away. I wondered if she knew my son based on her demeanor. When I asked my son, He claimed he didn't know her. Unable to comprehend, I decided to let go of the matter concerning my ex-husband and savor the moment. Afterward, I celebrated with my son and thoroughly enjoyed the day. I thought I wouldn't have any dealings with my ex-husband anymore, but a week later he called. I hadn't changed my phone number when I switched to a smartphone, intending to keep my ex-husband's number for a while and delete it later. However, with parenting and work, I had forgotten about it completely. Surprised by the call and considering we had nothing to talk about, I debated whether to answer. Out of curiosity, wondering why he would call now after all this time, I'd ultimately decided to pick up. Even though my ex-husband had never met John, the extended family seemed to hold a favorable opinion of him. Discussions about John were kept from my ex-husband, perhaps out of consideration, thinking a father might not be thrilled about a potential son-in-law. However, his new wife was aware of John and had shared the incident from a week ago with her brothers. The relatives were quite angry with my ex-husband, and the woman expressed her dissatisfaction, even mentioning the possibility of divorcing him. It's not surprising. When someone verbally abuses their own child and ex-wife, any sensible person would naturally consider divorce. It seems inevitable for Bob's wife to think he verbally abused her and their daughter too. Furthermore, my ex-husband Bob, who was about to retire, had a good job opportunity recommended by his relatives. However, due to this incident, it seemed like he might lose that opportunity. On the other hand, the brother of his current wife, a big-shot CEO, seems to be doing well. Bob had gotten a job through his connections and apparently made money easily thanks to that. However, because of this incident, it seems people no longer trust him, and he might not be able to get the job he was planning on. He reached out, suggesting that our son John should help him out in his time of trouble. However, Bob, who never really cared about our child and didn't even pay child support, just wanted to use him for his own convenience. I was beyond angry at Bob's audacity. After all those hurtful things he'd said, the very thought of living with him again made my skin crawl. Despite Bob suggesting that we get back together and live with John, I firmly declined, emphasizing that John doesn't owe him anything. I don't want to live a lonely life in my old age, Bob insisted. But I stood my ground, remembering his past actions. Since then, John and I have been living our lives smoothly. When I mentioned Bob's call to John, he told me that his relationship with his boss was still good. John was surprised to find out just how much his boss wanted him as a son-in-law. As for Bob, he has been kicked out by his second wife and is now struggling. Despite his desire for a lively retirement, he seems to be living a tough life alone, jobless, and with little savings. I had stopped caring about Bob, but remembering the things he did in the past, it felt like karma. As for me, life isn't exactly as I pictured when I married Bob, but I can say I'm truly happy now. Nowadays, I'm careful about my health so I don't become a burden to John, who's working hard. I enjoy my peaceful life living alone and look forward to the day John introduces me to my future daughter-in-law, and I get to meet my grandkids. Every day, I live my life happily and energetically.
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick? Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, "Get his boss here immediately." It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. "What is that idiot doing?" "All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next." Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. "If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you." I immediately followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. "Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize." Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. "What kind of training are you giving your subordinates?" Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed, I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? "I'm very sorry." Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong." "Mike, what have you done?" Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part." I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. "Why didn't you enter it into the system?" Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hope to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.